Thank you very much for coming to the second Sunday of our Marriage Matters. And so, it was a little unfortunate for us that we followed Dave Wells. That's a hard act to follow, but we're going to do our best. So we're sharing on how to divorce-proof your marriage. Part of our testimony is that we were very, very close to divorce. And so we learned a lot of things through there, but we'd like you to be able to learn off of our mistakes. And so that's going to be part of our story.
Yeah, it's actually, we're quite humbled to be here. And as I look around the room, I see a lot of people that I don't know, haven't met yet. It's certainly getting to be a bigger church. And even though I'm one of the leaders in the church here, I still have lots of people that I have yet to meet. And looking around the room, I see a lot of marriages that I know are strong. And so I honor you guys for coming. This is part of the reason why you have a strong marriage, because you're continually building into it, like Dave talked about there last week. And then some of you, maybe you're just getting started, maybe you're not yet married, maybe you're having some struggles. We're going to share a little bit of our story, and then we're also going to go through a few points to kind of let you guys know some tips as to how you can keep from heading down that path. So a little bit of statistics before we start here. Actually, in Canada, divorce rates have been falling steadily since 1990 in Canada. And the lowest number of divorces during that period was 4 years ago in 2020, where only 43,000 divorces were registered in Canada. Now, part of that had to do with COVID, and there were some court times got pushed back, and we can look at a lot of things as to why COVID maybe reduced that number. But at the same time, there was only 98,000 marriages registered in Canada at that same time. So divorce rates might be going down, but as we learned from Dave last week, and I think as we know, people just aren't getting married anymore. I mean, some are, but the trend has been that people just live together, and they're not doing that full commitment of marriage. And so we don't need to repeat Dave's teaching from last week, but instead we want to just give you guys a few principles that we've learned along the way to protect our marriage from heading towards divorce. Now, our story, we got married in 1991, and we dated for about 2 years, and we were in the world then. We didn't know the Lord. We didn't have any type of godly teaching. Neither Laura's parents nor my parents were believers. I came from a good family. Laura will share her family in just a moment. But I came from a good family. But I think the fear of shame was what kind of wanted me to not become divorced, not become a statistic. My dad, he was a very prideful man, good man, but he took a lot of pride in the fact that he had 6 kids and 22 grandkids, and I think he's got about 58 great-grandkids now. So we're well over 100 in our family, and he took great pride in the fact that there was never a divorce in our family. And so he passed away about 3 years ago, and since that time, there have been 2. So I'm actually quite thankful that he's not here. He was 97 years old, and he never lived to see that. But he took great pride in telling all his friends in the community that we lived in that, he kind of pretended he had a perfect family. So I had this fear of the shame of living with, just that pressure that my dad would put on me. So he always said, no Swan ever gets divorced. And so it's like, oh my goodness. And, I didn't think that would ever be the case anyway, but we got married, and the first 5 years were super difficult, like super difficult. And we didn't really know what we were doing. We didn't have any pre-marriage counseling. We had no pastoral oversight. We had no friends that spoke into us. We got married, and we wanted to learn ourselves. We wanted to do it our own way. And I certainly didn't want to take any advice from anybody. I was a very controlling person, and I didn't want anybody telling me what to do. And so that's kind of where we started with that. And that's all my notes. You can share your part.
For me, I grew up in a good family, but I would say that my parents were struggling. Their families had been struggling, and sometimes that just keeps passing on if nobody is able to find the help that they need. And so my dad was very controlling, and he was an alcoholic. And so the home was very unpredictable. You never knew if it was going to be a good day or a bad day, and definitely some verbal abuse. And so it was very stressful in the home. And my parents did divorce. And so when Ron and I got married, divorce was on the table for me, especially when we weren't believers. We were like, well, that's an option. But there was a part of me that really didn't want that to be my story, because as a child of a family of divorce, and I realized that can happen. Because my parents weren't getting help, my sister and I also didn't seek help, and so we were really struggling. We were struggling with being alone. My dad just left, and he didn't provide for my mom in any way. And so, although my mom and my sister and I became very close, without my father there was just another set of situations that I was walking into. And so, when we were struggling, there was a big part of me that was like, that's an option. And my mom and my sister would say, well, that's an option. If you want to leave, we'll help you. You can live here. But something deep down that's not what I wanted to choose. But I did entertain that. And so, but I'm stubborn. And so what I wanted Ron to leave. I wanted him to be the one that left, and so that I still look good. And I think you wanted the same.
I absolutely wanted the same, because then I wouldn't have to face the wrath of my father. It would be her fault, and and just honestly, like it would be her fault, and I could at least fall back on that. But I always felt like I'd be the black sheep. But there's no way I was going to leave. If you've ever heard my personal testimony, I actually entertained suicide for 6 months because it got so bad in our marriage, and it was financially related. And every day for 6 months, I would actually drive on a single-lane highway to commute to my job, and I would take my seatbelt off, and I would just grip the steering wheel as hard as I could, and just wanted to find the biggest truck that was coming towards me and just end it. And I thought that was going to be the only way that I could provide for my family financially, would be some life insurance payout, and at least give my wife and kids a bit of a start. And so that was my way out. Divorce was not a way out, because I was too afraid of my dad. And so we went through.
So we just understand that oftentimes when we feel that hopeless in a marriage, sometimes those are some of our thoughts. How do we get out of this, right? And we do want to honor that sometimes when we're in that hopeless place, we don't want to diminish that hopelessness that you may be feeling yourself, or you may know someone. What we were recognizing as we were kind of preparing is that we spent a lot of intentional time planning our wedding, like what I was going to wear, what he was going to wear, what flowers was I going to get, where would we do this, what food would we spend, or what would we serve, and yet so little on how we were going to actually walk out the marriage. So it was all about this one day we spent all this time and money on, and very little on the marriage. And I just was recognizing that we really needed to invest that same amount of time and energy and money in our marriage, and not just that one day of our wedding.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. So we got quite a bit of our story that we're going to weave into some points here now. So we're gonna head that way. I look around the room. I see Joel. I see Jason, and I mean, everybody knows that a 3-point sermon is the way that you go, right? Well, this is going to be 4 times better than one of Joel's 3-point sermons. We're going to go through 12 different habits that we can get into as married couples that can lead us to divorce. And so we're gonna try and weave a little bit of our personal journey in there as well. And so in no particular order, we'll start off with the first one here. And the first habit you can get into is constant criticism. And when I look back, one of the biggest warning lights in a marriage is when either the husband or the wife, usually it's both, in our case it was both, tend to spend most of your time speaking in a tone that's very critical in nature, bringing the other person down, pointing fingers. It can come from a critical spirit that we have. And so when we're very critical towards one another, we tend to only see the flaws in our spouse instead of the redeeming qualities that must be there. Everybody has some redeeming qualities. I don't care who you are. And at our worst time there, I think all I saw for sure were all the flaws, and I thought there was many of them. And I realize that when I'm pointing fingers at my wife, I actually got several more fingers that are pointing back at me, and so I needed to turn that around. But if we operate out of that critical spirit, we're often heading down that pathway towards divorce. And so, in as far as my personal life goes, I wouldn't say that I've got this mastered even yet. I've been a believer for 28 years now, and I'm still working on it. You know, I think I'm getting better every day, but it's a slow journey. And I can tend to go that way if I'm having a rough day. I can look at the worst side of someone instead of the best. And early on in our marriage, like in those first 5 years especially, I was very critical of Laura. And I look back and like I told you, money was our biggest issue at the time, or one of our biggest issues. And so I would spend whatever I wanted to spend. I had some habits in my life that I was using to escape and get away from, just kind of head into dreamland for a few hours. And I would look at the money that got spent coming out of our account, and I would lose my mind over, $25 at Walmart or something, because I was the one, and we're going to get into another one later that's going to kind of let you know as to a little bit more about this, but I would watch it so closely. And I'd have such a critical spirit towards her when I was the biggest hypocrite around, because I was doing way worse than she was doing. I was spending money frivolously. I was a closet smoker. I was digging through the couch to find enough money to buy a pack of cigarettes, and like, what a waste of money. And but I was pointing that finger at you.
So in our journey heading to divorce, we would point fingers, blame, accuse, and criticize because we so badly wanted it to be the other person's fault, right? I mean, I wasn't able to handle that it would be my fault in any way. And so the only way for me to push the blame away from me is I have to find someone else for it to land on. And so Ron would be that person. And so in the end, the question that I would ask myself is like, do I need to be right? Like, how badly do I need to be right? Because if I'm going to fight tooth and nail on having to be right, I'm going to have to put all the blame on my husband because I can't admit I'm wrong. And so same with Ron, he had to come to a place where like he has to admit he's wrong. He can't be right about everything. I can't be right about everything. But if we're going to fight that battle, we're going to end up criticizing, blaming, accusing. And so Ephesians 4:29 says, "Let no corrupting talk come out of your mouth, but only such as good for building up, as fits the occasion, that it may give you grace to those who hear it." That could be my own scribbles. I may have misquoted that exactly. But
Yeah, so that's number one. What's that? Number one. Number two, dividing everything into his and hers. And so this could be when you have separate bank accounts and separate hobbies and separate friends and separate dreams and essentially separate lives. If you're into that type of pathway, you're running the risk of you're setting yourself up where divorce would be a very real option. And I'm not saying that you have to put everything in joint name or whatever. Like, I realize there's times when one might have a savings account or something that's in their own name. I'm not saying that, but it's just, once you kind of get into that habit of everything is yours and mine, not ours, it can lead you down that path. I mean, marriage is all about building, whereas divorce tears down. Marriage is about combining. Husband and wife come together and they become one flesh. They become one, whereas divorce is all about dividing. And we didn't really do that. We had our own. We had our own lives, or pardon me, we had our joint lives, our joint accounts, all that kind of stuff. But in that first 5 years, we were just kind of drifting to where we were getting to the point where we were living separate lives, and in many ways we were. I mean, it was one of those things where it was getting harder and harder to look at us as one. We didn't know what one flesh meant in those first 5 years, and so it was a battle.
Yeah, and the word division actually means two visions. And so I have a vision and he has a vision, right? But actually, the kingdom, right? A kingdom divided will fall, just like a city divided will fall, a home divided will fall. And so as we were trying to go our different ways, and I was working, I was taking care of the kids, I was spending time with my mom and my sister, I really wasn't inviting him in. It just kept leading me to this life that I could live without him. And he was living a life, and it'll be another point later on, but he was living a life where there was many secrets and addictions of his smoking and some drinking. And so, he's living a path where it's leading him away from me as well.
Yeah. Number 3 is putting the marriage on hold while you're raising your kids. Now, we live in a day and age where, I look at this next generation, and it's actually I feel like my dad there. You youngsters, you young whippersnappers. I look at younger people now in the next generation. They're chasing after their kids everywhere. There's nothing wrong with kids' activities. I'm not saying that, but often they put their kids over their marriage, and they're so focused on getting the kids to school or getting them to their sporting event or getting them here, getting them there, making sure little Johnny and Susie are doing okay and all this. And we certainly had our fair share of that. But when you start going down that path, it can be a very dangerous place to go too. I remember saying to my kids, and I learned this on early, like my oldest daughter was 2 when we came to know the Lord. And so I learned this very early through a marriage course or something. And I always use this term, and as I look back on it, I probably could have used a little different wording of it, but the heart behind it was okay. I always used to look at my kids and I would say, look, she was my wife long before you were my kid. And and Laura and I would take holidays together, and just the two of us, and we would try to go on dates every once in a while. We tried to feed into and build our marriage. Not that the relationship with our children wasn't good. It was still good. My relationship with my kids, what I meant when I said that was like, look, our relationship as parent and child is very important, but so is this one. This doesn't take the place of this. This doesn't supersede this. We want to model a healthy marriage to our children so that one day they want to become married too. And so we really learned how to do that. And I made a lot of mistakes in how I talked and still tried to control things. I was still working through a lot of stuff in my life. But once we came to know the Lord, He really helped us understand some key things like that.
Honestly, I found that a lot more difficult. I don't know if it's being the mother and I was spending most of the time with the kids, day to day, that I did find that more difficult to put Ron before my kids, because they're, I'd be reasoning, well, they're young. They can't do things for themselves. They have to ask for help. And I need to be available at every moment of the time. But I can see that it became unhealthy. That's not untrue that your children will need your help, but it came to the point where I'd always be whatever the kids want to do, that would be how we would make our plans versus what would you like to do, or even taking that time to be intentional. I had my sister and my mom living in very close to us, so they could have babysat. I could have made those plans a little more often to be intentional with Ron. So looking back, I can see that was a gap that probably was quite a bit of conflict even after we came to know the Lord, that we probably had to work out. The truth is that we need to be intentional in all our relationships. Our relationships with our children, with our spouses, with our parents. And so as I was looking up, what would be the right order for you to have in your relationships? I think it came out of Colossians 3:18 and a few other verses, but it would be God would be your first priority, then your spouses, then your children, because they're a product of your one flesh, your parents, right? You're to honor your parents. And then extended family, then your brothers and sisters in Christ, and then the rest of the world. And so that doesn't mean you don't evangelize or you don't, but it's you do need to make sure that you're being intentional in those other relationships.
Yeah, that's good. Number 4 we have here is giving each other your leftovers. And this can be kind of described as like a cable company type marriage where, maybe cable company or your cell phone package, when you first become a customer, they give you all these perks and they throw in this and they throw in that and everything is wonderful and it's great, right? At the beginning, you always have the most exciting stuff. You're getting a good discount, whatever. No different than in the marriage. Everything is good at the start. But then over time, your cable company, all they do is just enough to keep you from going somewhere else. And so it gets to where they're actually not trying that hard to keep you. They're going after the new customers. They're just doing enough to keep you, hopefully. But then what ultimately happens? You get a flyer in the mailbox. Oh, competition company or a competitor out there is giving a much better deal. And so I'm going to entertain going elsewhere. Well, that happens in our marriage too. my wife isn't meeting my needs anymore. Well, jeepers, this other person that I work with seems to be a lot more attentive and finds me interesting. This can lead you down a path that leads towards an affair. I mean, it's a similar type thing. We can't give our spouse our leftovers. We have to be intentional about building. And I think we definitely experienced that early on, especially. I remember how infatuated I was during our dating period. I would go over to visit Laura at her place at, I don't know, 3 in the afternoon. I'd stay till probably 10 or 11 at night. I'd go home, and what would we do? I'd phone her, and we'd talk for another 3 hours on the phone. Then I'm just dead at work the next day, but we were so infatuated with each other. And then over time, you get married, you get a house, you get a job, you get some kids, and all of a sudden, those are things that are pulling you apart, and your spouse just gets the leftovers.
When I was looking this a little bit more information up on this, they call it sunset fatigue, actually, where you're too drained, you're too tired, and you're too preoccupied by the end of the day to be fully present with the one you love the most. And so that's often when you don't have the time, you don't have the interest, you don't have the availability by the end of the day, and so the leftovers are what you're getting. And so, and sometimes we gravitate to places or areas where we're getting value. Sometimes, men or women, they love being at work because they're getting praise there, they're getting recognized, but then they come home, and then if there's criticism coming, I mean, they're going to probably pick the place where it doesn't have so much criticism. At least I would choose that too, right? And so sometimes we have to look at, is there a place that's actually giving us praise and recognition, and we're not getting it quite at home? And I don't mean that you have to go home and your husband or wife has to just continually praise you, but I think that's where we have to note, are we being too critical, I guess is the word. And I recognize, too, that time is a relationship robber. Like Ron was saying, busyness leads to exhaustion. And so they had a couple suggestions about making moments, that you could choose to make moments in your day. When you say hello, you could make a moment, right? Be a little bit more significant or intentional about that good morning hello, or that time you greet them, or saying goodbye instead of just bye and walking out the door and you haven't even looked at them. Maybe you give them a kiss and say goodbye, have a great day, or even before you go to sleep. These are just small things that are a suggestion. And as I was researching, it talked about some places where you could maybe find significant time with your spouse would be meals. I mean, oftentimes we're rushing in and out, and there will be times, probably if you have your children in activities, that meals on the go are going to be what has to happen. But if you could choose to sit down at the table and have a meal with your spouse, the opportunity for conversation and connection are going to be more likely to happen. And rest. The Sabbath is important. You need to take time to rest with your spouse. And so that doesn't mean just sleeping all the time, but actually doing something in leisure time that's enjoyable.
Yeah. Number 5, holding grudges and keeping score. So if you're married, or if you're in a long-term relationship, or you've been in one, the chances are pretty good that you have offended your spouse, or your spouse has offended you. If you've been married longer than 15 minutes, I'm sure that's happened. And so we need to ooze forgiveness, and we need to offer grace freely. I mean, early on, again, I look back to our marriage, and we did it all wrong early. Everything that we're telling you here, we've done it wrong, and we're on a pathway to trying to learn how to do it right. We're doing a little bit better each day. But I remember early on in our marriage, I would build these stories up in my mind as to why I was right and Laura was undoubtedly wrong. And for me, it was especially wrong, or especially strong, when my needs weren't being met. If I felt like she wasn't meeting my needs, man, I would build up a story. She must hate me. What did I do? I can't believe that she's doing this to me. Doesn't she know what, I build this story up to be so big, and it really isn't. It isn't a big deal. I mean, I don't know. It was one of those things where I tended to go to the extreme on almost every emotion all the time. I would go to the extreme thinking all of these things she's doing on purpose. She's out to get me. It's just a matter of time before she leaves anyway. Whatever. But as we learn how to not keep score, and to try and forgive quickly and give grace freely, that's where we actually learn to walk in more unity with one another.
So the Bible says to get rid of all bitterness, and forgiveness is the solution, right, to releasing the bitterness. And forgiveness is, the Bible commands us to do it. As He forgives us, we need to forgive others. And so I've really been learning, like, what does that forgiveness look like? And so one of the programs that we run here at the church is the Genesis program. And then it really does sort of like lay out what would forgiveness ultimately look like. And in forgiveness in its fullness, I'm sure I did forgive Ron, but when I really looked at what he had done to hurt me or miss my heart, what was the effect it had on me? What did I really feel when he hurt me? Like, did I feel rejected? Did I feel alone? Did I feel misunderstood? What did I judge him? Like, man, you're so selfish. Like the things I would have judged him with, and the things I decided I'm never going to let him do that to me again. I'm never going to do that for him. Like those kind of promises that I made and the things that I wanted him to do that he never did, I needed to look at all those things so that I could really fully forgive him from my heart in the fullness, because it matters. It matters if I am waiting for an apology and he doesn't give me one, then am I going to decide not to forgive him until I wait for that apology? I'm the one that's stuck, right? I'm the one that's hurting. So I need to forgive regardless. If it's like I've decided that I'm never going to do something for him again, is that actually the right thing to never want to, I don't know, make a certain meal because he didn't come home for it? And I'm like, I'm never making you a meal again. Like, I know that sounds crazy, but in some way that would be, some of those inner heart decisions where it's like, why do I put all that effort in if you're not even, appreciating it? And so I needed to look at all the fullness of that to be able to fully release him. This is one of the things that are not going to be on my list. But what's always challenging in a marriage is hormone changes for women, because I'm in menopause and my glasses are fogging up, so I'm going to have to clear them off for a minute.
Yeah, that could be number 13. It's a good thing. It's a good thing that we got to the place where we're at before she hit menopause. I have so much grace for her now, and I mean, I look at I always say the first 5 years of our life of our marriage were brutal, and they were. The next 5 came after we came to know Jesus, and they were still tough, but they were good. The next 5 years were pretty good. The next 10 years were really, really good, and the last 8 or so years, I'm not sure how many it's been now, have been absolutely fantastic. Like I feel like I'm the luckiest guy in the world, and I'm glad that I got this kind of outlook by the time she hit menopause, because I need a little bit of grace. I mean, 40 below, and the window in our bedroom is wide open, and I'm just frozen. But that's life. Anyways, number 6, trusting your feelings more than trusting your commitments. And so if you're married here, I just want you to think of the time when you fell in love. And what was that like? How did you feel? Yeah, that was amazing, wasn't it? I mean, I remember that the feeling was incredible. I just absolutely loved it. And you're kind of gooey and gushy towards each other, and it's all wonderful. And feelings are important, but they're certainly not trustworthy. We can't trust them. And there's going to be days when you don't feel like you want to be in this relationship, or you don't feel like you want to come home for supper, or whatever. But our feelings, they can be fickle. And they're always based on current circumstances. Like your feelings are based on kind of what's going on in your life right now. But we need to make sure that we base all of this on the commitment that we made that day we got married, that lifelong commitment. We can't just go based on our feelings, because it's going to let us down. And feelings certainly, and this is something that I also had to learn in our journey together. Feelings they need to be recognized, they need to be validated, they need to be honored, but they can't be what you base all your decisions on. Feelings are often what leads people into affairs. Like I said earlier, I might not have that same passion that we had when we first got married, but I still have that same commitment. My commitment grows stronger every single day, and that commitment is what's going to keep me from chasing that feeling with somebody else. And so that's something that I've learned, and I'm sure Laura's learned as well, and we're very thankful for basing our marriage on the commitment, not on feelings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the word commitment actually means to sacrificially give to the other person, to be one flesh. And so we do really need to remember that we've made a commitment. We've, our yes be yes, our no be no. We've made a commitment, a covenant that we need to honor.
Yeah, that's right. And so number 7, making decisions without consulting your spouse. This is one where pride is often what convinces us that we're in charge. I can make this decision, and certainly there's decisions that we can make on our own. We don't have to consult our spouse over every decision. I didn't ask Laura what shoes I should wear tonight. If we're going somewhere really nice, I probably would ask her what shoes I should wear. But there's certain things that we trust each other for. Like Laura likes to decorate the home, and if she goes somewhere and she buys something for the home, I trust that she can make that decision. We kind of have dollar amounts that, for anything over a certain dollar amount, say $500 or whatever, we're always going to talk about that. We're not going to just make rash decisions without it's. One time I bought a house without telling her, but it turned out to be the right house. It was right after we got saved, and that's a whole other story. But yeah, I bought a house without her seeing it, so that's major trust that she showed in me there. And to this day, that's still our favorite house, probably. But all that to say that, yeah, there's certain things when your pride can come into your life, and pride can tell you that you don't need to consult your spouse. But early on in those tough years, yeah, I was making all my own decisions. Laura was making all her own decisions. We didn't really come together. I was hiding things with regards to our finances. She didn't know about it. I remember her going to pay for gas, and every one of our credit cards was maxed out. We had no money in our account. She had to phone my boss's wife to come and pay for like $40 worth of gas. That's where we were at in our life. And so those were decisions. We got to that point from a lot of decisions that I made on my own.
And I mean, we've since kind of come up with our own sort of like boundaries for that if maybe a purchase is over $200, then we kind of consult the other person. I'm not saying that's the dollar amount you should use, but we kind of decided that after this amount, I mean, I can hit 200 in groceries pretty quickly, that we would kind of discuss, do we really need this? Is this something we want together? And also honoring each other's time. I don't say yes to something that includes Ron unless I've actually checked on him, and he does the same for me, right? I'm honoring him in that way where I don't, I've learned, I used to voluntold my kids and voluntold Ron, and I would say I still strongly suggest at times, but I don't say a full yes until I honor him to find out if that's something that he would be willing to do with me. The other thing about making decisions on your own, the Word of God actually says that there's wisdom in a multitude of counselors, and so there's actually wisdom when you talk together and communicate and make a decision together.
Yeah, I mean, one can chase 1,000, two can chase 10,000, and it's just wisdom, like you said, for us to discuss some of those things. Number 8's a big one: trying to change each other. Now, there's a saying that a woman will marry a man hoping that she can change him, and he won't change. And a man marries a woman hoping that she'll never change, and undoubtedly she does. Now that's a little. I say that in jest. It's not necessarily true. I don't believe that to be true at all, because when I look back at our marriage, we've both changed a lot over the years. We've both grown closer to the Lord and closer to each other, and I suppose there are marriages out there where, and we were like this probably for the first 5 years, where both of us would dig in our heels and say, I'm hoping she doesn't change, but she's changing, and I don't like the changes that I'm seeing, and I'm digging in my heels, and I'm not willing to budge an inch. And it was pride and selfishness that caused us to do that. But when both husband and wife are trying to build a healthy marriage, I feel that over time they both change for the better. When they're both building into the marriage, they both change for the better. And we only truly have the ability to change the person that we see in the mirror. That's really the only person that I can change. I try to control. I spent a lot of my life controlling my whole family, trying to get them to do what I wanted. It never worked out the way I hoped. The only person I can truly change is myself, and with the help of the Lord, He's done that for us. And so I look back to those first 5 years. I keep alluding to those first 5 years, and we actually recognized that we were heading down a path that wasn't very good, and we sought out a marriage counselor. We actually went to several, I think, but one in particular was my favorite. She was actually a female, marriage counselor, and this is what she said. She said to us that I was doing everything right, and she was the one who had to change. And I'm like, yes! Finally, thank you! Like, how brutal of advice is that? Like, that's terrible. Like, I look back, I was the most selfish, controlling person, but man, that was music to my ears. Like, of course, like, finally, somebody sees what I've been seeing for these last 5 years, but we know that that's not true. And I look back now, and it was just complete immaturity on my part. It made no sense at all. But you know what? It's a funny story to tell now, and there was something in it. You know, God says that all things work together for good for the sake of those who love him and are called according to his purpose. And even though we weren't following Jesus at that time, he could see the future. He knew. And there was something that we learned in that time, at least what I learned. I mean, I just saw my immaturity, my vain, the conceit in my life, just the arrogance that I operated in, thinking I was doing everything right, she was doing everything wrong. And I look back, and I was by far more the person that needed to change. And she would probably say the same about herself. But that's how we grew. We became a little bit less selfish, and we started looking in the mirror and saying, okay, what's my part in this? How do I have to change?
That was when our marriage significantly changed, when we went to a different counselor and came to know the Lord. But we also, it was really just a program. It was called Marriage Ministries. And it was just a program that helped us look at our own stuff. And so it wasn't about like whose fault it was. It was about like, where am I missing the mark? Where am I not walking the way the Lord would want me to walk? And I could honestly see the areas that I was missing, the places that I had missed Ron's heart, the things that I was doing. And he was able to see those. And as both of us were walking in that way, our marriage was inevitably going to get better. It is difficult to be in any relationship where one is doing the work and the other one is not doing anything. And so it was pretty hopeless when the counselor said Ron was doing it all right and I was doing it all wrong. Because in my mind, I'm like, now I don't know I don't even know exactly what to change here. Like my whole person. And so that's not, there was things we learned along in that journey, but until we both get to the place where I need to make changes and I can see my own, my own places where the Lord wants to make changes in me, the going is difficult if there's only one person making the changes.
Yeah, I would agree with that. The number 9 is planning an exit strategy. Now, this seems pretty obvious. If you're planning an exit strategy, there's a chance that it could lead to divorce. I mean, this is not rocket science here, but I never actually thought that we were planning an exit strategy, but we were. Our exit strategy was that the other person was going to leave. And healthy couples, they eliminate that word divorce from their vocabulary. And when I look back, it goes into my own personal testimony. I remember that morning when I was at my own rock bottom. I didn't know what to do. I'd contemplated suicide for 6 months, and my sister set up a breakfast meeting with a pastor, and I went to meet with a pastor in Martinsville, Saskatchewan, and he shared the Bible with me, and he shared the gospel with me, and I knew for the first time that day what I needed to do. And I remember coming home from giving my heart to the Lord in a parking lot at the Adobe Inn, if you've ever been to Martinsville, where I got saved. And everything that we're teaching here tonight, the most obvious thing is let God guide you, let the Lord lead you, let the Lord teach you. And we know that when we throw ourselves on the mercy of Jesus, that he has a way to make changes. And he made a change in me. And I came home and Laura saw the change in me. And through that, a couple weeks later, she gave her heart to the Lord, and something supernatural took place. All of a sudden, divorce was 100% off the table. There was no chance that we were going there anymore. We still had problems. We still fought. We still screamed at each other once in a while, usually on Sunday morning, strangely enough. And until we got to the point that it was too late to go to church, then all of a sudden there's peace in the home again. Go figure, right? We have a very real enemy who's trying to divide. Yeah. But God is a builder, and he's trying to bring us together. And that was the biggest thing, I think, for us, is that that exit strategy got taken off the table. Divorce was no longer an option. So that means we got to work this out. That means we got to build something out of this marriage.
I think not even just the divorce word, but I know there were times when I would just feel like I just don't think I can argue with him anymore. And so I'd say, I just got to leave. And I was meaning I need to go for a drive, I need to go for a walk. But just me saying that I got to leave, I think that just even saying that can sort of instill this hopelessness of like, are we going to be able to bridge this back again? And I recognized actually the impact of that on my kids, because there was even one of my own daughters who said, every time you said that, Mom, I thought you were not coming back. And I think Ron didn't think that. Like, I think he understood I was just going to go for a drive and kind of cool off and figure out what's my part in this and what's his part before we just continually argue. But the impact of just saying I need to leave for my kids was actually quite significant. They didn't understand. And so I think in the fullness of, our words, we got to be careful. Like, what does that actually mean to the other person? And so we learned, how do we fight well? How do we resolve conflict? Because if you have if you have conflict and you don't want to resolve it, then sweeping it under the rug is not going to work. The lump gets bigger and bigger and bigger. You're going to trip over it and it's going to grow. We kind of use this saying that what's buried alive stays alive. So it's still there. But we've learned that we need to build a bridge. And so Ron is like, I want to pelt it right now. I want to figure it out right now. And I'm like, I need a little bit of time. I just need to think, because he's so good at like debating that I can get all tongue-tied. And so we had to decide that how do we honor both people? And so Ron would give me a little bit of time, like I didn't get days. And then we'd say, okay, I'm going to go for a walk, and then we're going to meet back here, let's say in an hour, and then let's talk about this again. And so Ron honored me by letting me have that time, and I honored him by let's get back and let's actually work this out today, and not just keep letting it fester for days and days or weeks. But I would say that was an epiphany that I got, and also that's been helpful for us to resolve conflict.
Yeah, and just to add one thing there. I mean, as Christians, we all like to quote the verse. Don't let the sun go down on your anger. Whenever somebody's getting married, you always give them that advice, right? You pull out that verse, and there's truth in that. I'm not saying anything against that, but we wouldn't stay up until it was resolved. We would make a decision saying, you know what, we're both in the worst place of the entire day. We're tired, we're frustrated. We're actually gonna go to sleep, but we're gonna deal with this in the morning. And I believe it's kind of the same thing, but that's always worked for us. We've never felt like, oh, we can't sleep. It goes against God's word if we go to sleep and we're still mad at each other. So we kind of had that agreement where we're going to deal with this, but it's going to be in the morning when we're fresher, and it's always worked for us. So. Number 10 is hiding the fact that you're married. Now, I wouldn't say this is a common thing among Christian couples, but I wouldn't also be naive enough to think that it doesn't happen. This is when you're pretending, that you're not married, taking your ring off, just kind of avoiding the fact of letting somebody know that you're in a committed relationship. These are all slippery slopes that can get into a bad spot quickly. And I don't think that, looking back, I think even in our worst times, that's something that's never been a thing for us. But if that's something that you're finding you're flirting with somebody, or you can even have an emotional affair. It doesn't have to always be a sexual affair. You can have an emotional affair by maybe a colleague in a different city or something. You don't let them know that you got a wife and kids at home or whatever. So those things, of course, that's a natural thing that would be something you'd want to avoid for sure. Anything to add on that? Okay. Yeah, we're running out of time here. We're doing okay, I guess. Number 11 is a big one, and this is secrets. Now, I struggled with this for a good part of my upbringing. I learned very quickly that I could hide things from my parents, get away with what I needed to get away with, so that I could do what I wanted to do. And that just carried over into my marriage. And I shared with you those first 5 years of financial disaster that we had, and I was hiding everything from Laura. Like I was everything that was not healthy, I was hiding from her. I was hiding the fact of how much debt we were in. I was making decisions without consulting her, getting another credit card, and trying to take the pressure off and being able to survive. And it was just an absolute disaster. And I actually hid from my wife a closet smoking habit for 2 years. And so how do you do that, right? She didn't know. That shows you how close we were. But I mean, this is how mischievous I can become. I would go for a walk, I get away, kind of like what Laura said before. I'm going to go. I got to get out of here. go for a walk, have a cigarette or two. I'd come home, and or maybe I'd go for a drive or something. And I'd always just take my cigarette fingers, these two right here. I put them in the nozzle of my gas tank, and I just rub a little bit on here, and I'd walk in, and that overpowers the smell of smoke. So, did you fill up the car? Yeah, I had to fill up the car. Again? So anyways, that's what I would do. I was hiding all these things. But we're living in a day and age when pornography is a pandemic. Like, it's an epidemic in our society. People hide that from their spouse. It's a secret. Maybe they have a secret addiction to shopping or gambling, or maybe it's smoking or drinking or other substances, whatever. I mean, secrets are damaging. And I've always thought that for me, it used to be a way that I'd kind of protect myself. But now I live in a time when I feel like it's more of a protection for me and for our marriage to keep things in the open. I listened to a guy, a Promise Keeper guy, and one time he said, he does all this traveling around, and he talks on commitment to your spouse, and one time he got hit on in a restaurant in a city that he wasn't from, in the hotel. This woman approached him and hit on him. Well, the first thing he did is he told his wife. And you know what? If there was anything in him that wanted to give in to that temptation, the moment you tell your wife, it's gone. It's like anything that's in darkness, as soon as you expose it to the light, the darkness has to flee. And we try to live by that. We try to, it's not that I come home and it's like, is there anything I did today that I haven't told her about? Let me see. It's not that. But the big things I want to keep in the open. I don't want to give the enemy a foothold to come in anywhere and use that against us and against our marriage, against our family.
Mm-hmm. I mean, secrets are often born out of shame. And so when we're doing things to try to make ourselves feel okay, those are usually those behaviors that we want to keep a secret, right? We're using them to cope. We're trying to find a way to make ourselves feel okay when we're spiraling down, or if we feel hopeless or depressed or anxious. And so I just want to encourage you that if that is something that you feel like I have been sort of keeping something, I would really encourage you to find some safe person to really share that with, to break its power, and then of course to be able to share that with your spouse so you can walk that journey together, walking that journey of healing, because that's what's going to bring strength to your marriage. But again, all of those the coping behaviors that we keep secret, they're really just to try to make ourselves feel okay. They're a survival behavior. And so they're not good in and of themselves, but we would just want to recognize that behavior is communication. So what is it that you need, right? We just want to look at that behavior and go, okay, where are you needing some support? Where are you struggling? But even for secrets, it wasn't so much that even Ron kept secrets, but a lot of the times he would actually tell his best friend something first and kind of elaborate on it, and then I'd get this little piece of it. And I'm like, well, what about this, or what about that? Oh, I already told Al, when we lived in a different city. And I'm like, but I kind of wanted to know that, and so it wasn't necessarily a secret, but it was like he gave the best version of something to his best friend, and I got a tidbit of it because he'd already expressed all that, had all the excitement. And so we recognize that we also need to honor our spouses in that as well. When something's going really well, or maybe not so well, that I would share with him, and he would be my greatest supporter, my greatest encourager, instead of me sharing it with a girlfriend or a friend instead of my husband.
Yeah, and that goes back to the whole leftovers thing. I can do that and come home, and it's leftovers, and so yeah, that's good. So number 12, last one here. I mean, there's probably a million of them, but selfishness. And so we're all selfish by nature. It's our default setting when we come out of our mother's womb, and marriage can only work when we put the needs of our spouse ahead of the other one. Now, for me, I still struggle with it. It's still my default setting. I try to kill the old man every day. I try to walk in the new man, and each day is a little better than the last. And one day when I get to glory, I'm going to walk in true selflessness. But for now, I'm still fighting with that. And so, sounds difficult to continually put your spouse ahead of you, but we learned this a few years ago, and I think there's a book, it's called The Love Dare or something like that, I looked at that a number of years ago. It was really good. Little things. I think it's a 40-day journey where you can just do one little thing for your husband or wife every day. And so that's what I started with. And it started to turn the light bulb on as to what I could do to serve my wife and how I could put her needs ahead of mine. I still fail at this every single day. But I'm more aware of it, and I'm more aware of what she needs. And you look at the 5 love languages. We all have a love language. Ours are not the same. I only know how to speak one language, and that's my language. And so I do all the things for her that I'm hoping to get from her. And she would do all the things for me that she's hoping to get from me. But as you learn what that other person, what your spouse's or your husband or wife's love language is, that's how you can learn to serve them and learn how to bless them in ways that it always reciprocates too. And even though if you go into it with like, if I do this for her, she darn well better do this for me tonight. Well, you're going in with the wrong attitude. And I've done that. Like, trust me, I've done that lots of times. It doesn't work. But when you sow into your spouse, when you serve her, and you give her what she needs, it will always come back. It might not be today, it might not be tomorrow, but it will come back to you. And those are all things that we're still learning. I mean, I love this saying. We want to be selfless, and we want to be serving the other, even though. What is that? Oh, sorry about that. Timer's up, so we're almost done. I want to be the thermostat, not the thermometer. The thermometer, all that does is tells you kind of what's going on, what the temperature in the room is, and it moves with the temperature. But the thermostat, that tells the temperature what it's going to be. And that's what we try to do when we serve each other. We want to be the thermostat. We want to go first and serve the other, bless the other, put the other person first in every situation possible.
In Philippians 2, it says, "Do nothing out of selfish ambition. Rather, in humility, value others above yourself, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others." And so I know we're done, and I just wanted to say that, it looks like Ron was like the only guy that ever had problems, but we just didn't share both sides of every part of our journey. But Ron is an amazing guy, and I'm just so thankful for the hard work that he did, the hard work that I've done, and that we're intentional about continually working on our marriage. Right now, we're empty nesters. Our children are all grown, and they're, not living in the house, or at least not in the house very often. And so now we have to walk a different journey, right? Because the busyness of kids is not actually pulling my time. And so we are, learning to find some new things and some things we used to do together, doing that more often. But in Galatians, where did I put that now?
Is it on the last page there?
Right here. In 1 Corinthians, if we think about, this is always the marriage quote, "Love is patient and love is kind. It doesn't boast, and love is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It's not self-seeking. It's not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. It does not delight in evil, but rejoices in truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, and always perseveres." And so that's the goal that God would want for us, in our own hearts towards our spouse, and that our spouse would have towards us. So thank you very much. And just pray.
Yeah, I want to just pray for you guys here real quick, and then we'll take a break. But I just want to really point to Jesus as the one. We wouldn't have. Our story, it can sound like, we were on the rocks and now we're doing really good. And we are doing really good. But I got to give all the credit to Jesus, because without him, we wouldn't have been able to do this. And when I see some of my secular friends, my non-Christian friends that are struggling, that's just the one thing that I want them to have. I just want you to know Jesus, because the one thing that pastor said to me when I gave my heart to the Lord, he said, "You're on this side of the fence. You're at rock bottom. You need to jump over to this side of the fence. Is there any way it could be worse than where you're living right now?" Well, no, it isn't. So I took a chance. I took a chance on Jesus, and he proved himself to be right. It doesn't mean that life is going to be easy. It doesn't mean that you're not going to go through trials. None of those things, but we have somebody to help us now. And Jesus is the one that helped us get to where we are. We need the Lord to do it. So let me just pray real quick, and then we'll take a break here. Thank you, Jesus, Lord. I thank you that our testimony is your testimony, Jesus. I thank you that you are the one who came and rescued us out of a pit. Like Joel talked about this morning, we were in a pit, God, but you saw that as a pit stop to move to where you've taken us now. And you have a future for us that I don't even know what it looks like. And you have a future for every person here, whether they're married, whether they're in a fantastic marriage, a struggling marriage, a lukewarm marriage, or maybe they're not married and they would like to be. Lord, you know each story. I pray that you come and touch each person individually, Lord, that you would bless them, that you would show them that you're real, and you would show them that you're fully capable to do what you want to do in their life. And I just release them to you today. And I thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.